Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of The Cards Court, the number one weekly Ball State basketball show in the world. I'm your host, Griffin Leonard. Joining me, as always, this week as my co-host is Sam Niger, and joining us later on the show is a guest that we've been hoping to get for a while, the president of Ball State University, Geoffrey Mearns. I can't wait. With that, the court is now in session. Sam, big week of Ball State basketball, a huge matchup yesterday that we'll get into. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Griffin. I'm so happy to be back. Basketball finally feels like it's in full swing as we're heading towards February. It's closer than we realize.
Well, we didn't have a show last week with Martin Luther King Day, so let's go through the results of the last 2 weeks of Ball State basketball, starting with Ball State versus Akron, a close loss at home. The women's team kept their MAC undefeated season alive with a win at Buffalo on that Wednesday the 10th. Doubleheader on the 13th, last Saturday, Ball State women's basketball winning a big game Greek night in Muncie against Bowling Green. That was the matchup of the semifinals. They won that by 15 points, and then the men's fell on the road by 5 points at Toledo. Midweek action, Ball State men's basketball broke their losing streak with a big win in Ypsilanti on the road against Eastern Michigan. They won that game by 14, and then the women's basketball team took on
Central
Michigan.
Yeah.
That was that matinee game out in Mount Pleasant. They won by 32. And then this weekend, Ball State men's basketball lost a heartbreaker in overtime, which we'll talk about here in a minute. They lost that at home to Miami. And then the women's basketball team knocked off Toledo in a big win in front of a huge crowd at Worthen Arena, 14 points. Sam, let's start with the men's game. They finally broke their losing streak. It felt like there was momentum going their way. They were going to win. They were going to beat their rivals. They were going to do it. They were going to get 2 in a row. And then Darwishi Hunter hit a miracle shot to send it into overtime, and the Cardinals never recovered.
Yeah, it seems like every week when we talk about this Ball State men's basketball team that we bring up their youth, right? Like it was good to get that win against Eastern Michigan, especially on the road, because this is a team that has struggled on the road this season. But you have to understand that there is still room for growth, and when a young team that hasn't won a lot in conference play all of a sudden gets a curveball of a miracle shot, like you said, thrown at them, sending them to overtime, it's tough for a team to recover like that. It's tough for them to come out and play well in overtime, and they certainly did not for the start of overtime. It's one of those things where you're happy with how you're playing right now because you're competing with teams like Akron. You know, you're competing with Miami, who is your rival. It's just the youth of this team has not gelled to the point chemistry-wise where they're ready to win some of those close, gutsy games, especially against teams as good as Akron and in matchups as important as the one we saw against Miami.
Well, so I was on the sideline for that game, and I was in the huddle a couple times, the Ball State huddle, and there was a lot of positive vibes around that game, and it seemed like everyone was just having fun out there. And then when that shot went in to force overtime, the life got sucked out of the building, the juice got sucked out of the team, and it was a completely different overtime. Is that a point of concern, or is that just the way it goes?
It depends on what kind of a team you're dealing with. When you're dealing with a team that is as young as Ball State, I hate to keep going back there, but that seems to be the crux of the problem is that there's just no chemistry right now. When a team as young as this team faces adversity like that and the script flips so quickly, it is hard to get focused in to be able to compete for that overtime period. Miami, with their experience, was feeding off the energy. They were feeding off the momentum that sent them into overtime, and Ball State just kind of took a back seat at that point. It's about mental toughness. This team is not as mentally tough as we've seen Ball State teams in the past, and that comes with the inexperience, the number of transfers, a big freshman class, a lot of freshmen getting some playing time, and a lack of depth for Ball State. Those are the big problems for me right now, and I think those especially showed against Miami, specifically that mental toughness, something to work towards, because I think Ball State could win some closer matchups down the stretch this season.
Yeah, final question before we move on to women's. You look at the MAC standings right now, we're at 10th, 1-5, and granted, we're playing a lot better of a brand of basketball than our record gives us credit for, but at the end of the day, you're 1-5 in the MAC through 6 games. You're in 10th. You're out of Cleveland as it stands, granted only by 1 game at the moment. Is it time to panic?
Absolutely not, because we've played some of the best teams in the Mid-American Conference to this point. You look ahead in the schedule, the next 2 games this week, at Buffalo, who is bottom table at the MAC right now, and then home against Northern Illinois on Saturday in front of a pumped-up Worthen Arena against an opponent that is very much beatable, an opponent that, again, is a rivalry matchup that you care about winning. Just tackle it one game at a time. Tackle it 1 week at a time. I think if this week goes poorly, then it's maybe time to step back and see what is the true problem here. But if Ball State handles this week like they should, they'll prove to everybody that it is nowhere near time to panic yet.
Yeah, if the Cardinals cannot get it done this week, then it's time to ask some serious questions.
Agreed.
But I have confidence in the boys to be able to do that.
Certainly.
Let's move on to women's quickly here. The winning streak has reached double digits. Sam.
So awesome.
10-game win streak.
Awesome.
6-0 in the MAC. 16-2 overall. I had a conversation with a couple of my roommates yesterday. Are we an at-large type team? If we don't win the MAC, are we good enough? Like that is something that Ball State fans should seriously be asking at this point. I haven't looked at the AP poll yet. I'll do that right now. I'm assuming we don't have any votes.
We don't. No.
But is that starting to get into the conversation? Because you look at the schedule, only 2 losses are to 2 ranked teams.
And to be honest with you, Griffin, it's a possibility, but it's not a possibility that Ball State fans should want to consider at this point. We just went out and beat the other best team in the MAC, the only other undefeated team in the MAC, the team that we have been trying to get over the hump against for, who knows, the past 5 years at this point. Ball State finally made it over the hump of Toledo. They solidified themselves as the team to beat, and they are embracing the fact that they've got a target on their back. If they play the rest of the season like they did last night, yes, let's give them 1 or 2 losses just because that's how the basketball season goes. If they play consistently like they did last night, this is a team that should win the Mid-American Conference tournament and go to the NCAA tournament. Now, that's a lot of expectations, but you don't want to consider the fact that you could be an at-large bid when you can just get the job done and earn your dancing shoes to go play in March.
I agree, and there's those expectations because of the talent and the skill that this team has. You look at the game against Toledo, it wasn't a one-person show.
No.
Like, Allie Becky played well, but she ran into foul trouble. She had to spend a lot more time on the bench than she normally does. Maddie Bischoff had a solid game shooting, but she wasn't lights out by any means. But I will say that half-court, or not quite half-court, but the halftime buzzer beater was electric. I felt like Toledo had control of the game in the first quarter. Ball State was getting it back, but it was a toss-up. But after that buzzer beater went in, the second half was all Cardinals.
Yeah.
And it was a team effort. Alex Richard really stepped up, and there aren't a whole lot of concerns on this team. It's just, can they keep it up? Because they have the talent to do so.
The only thing that jumped out at me last night as a possible concern, and this is really nitpicky because we do have a team this good in front of us, is that there was a lack of depth last night. And there, at one point, the only 2 scorers through the first quarter were Becky and Bischoff. Now, obviously, as you said, Richard got on the score sheet in double digits, as did Nyla Hampton. Her and Becky both scoring their 1,000th career point was awesome. But outside of that starting lineup, there wasn't huge contributions from the bench. That's not a regular thing that we see with Ball State. You know, usually Poojgros and Mule add significant stats to the score line, but that wasn't necessarily the case last night. I think you have to ride the hot hand of your starters, but I think Brady Sallee knows that he's going to have to put more trust in his bench players as we start to go down the stretch this season because, you know, if you keep your starters out there with the marathon of a season that we have left, you risk getting people hurt, you risk people kind of losing that hot streak. So maybe some more production out of the bench is the only concern right now.
I agree with you, but I will say one thing. Hannah Mule, 15 minutes played off the bench. She had that steal and a score.
She played really well.
One of 2 steals in that game. I expect to see her get more minutes as this season goes on. Agreed. We're going to take a break. When we get back, we're going to have President Geoffrey Mearns on the show. Cannot wait for that. So stay tuned on the other side of this one. You're listening to the Cards Court on the SL Digital Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Chris Taylor, Senior Director of Digital Sports Production and Ball State Sports Link, the nation's first 4-year academic digital sports production program. It's the intersection of sports and storytelling. where we're training the next generation of digital content producers. It's truly unique because a lot of schools have sports broadcasting and sports journalism, and while we have elements of both of those, our focus is on sports media production and the behind-the-scenes work. And I think that's what separates us at Ball State, because a lot of schools will teach students to learn production or live event streaming, but we're teaching storytelling, and that is producing long-form, layered feature stories where we can humanize our student athletes and our coaches and tell the story as to why they're playing their sport at Ball State. Anyone can produce or edit things that are flashy and look good, but can you tell a story? And at Ball State, I think we really teach that, and the success is evident.
Welcome back to the Cards Court here on the SL Digital Radio Network, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. We're joined now by not only Sam Niger, but a guest that we've been wanting to have on the show for a while, the president of this wonderful university, Mr. Geoffrey Mearns. Thank you so much, President Mearns, for coming on the show.
You're welcome. It's great to be with you today.
Let's talk first about you, because I think depending on the college, like the president, everybody knows the president. They may have a good reputation. They may have a bad reputation. I feel like you're one of the most recognizable and most loved faces on this campus. But I don't think everybody necessarily knows your story. I'm sure when you were a kid, you weren't like, well, when I grow up, I want to be a college president. Like, how did you get here? And what was your... Tell us your life story.
Yeah, so first of all, great to be with you, and thank you for your kind words. I feel so fortunate to be a part of the Ball State community. So I'm one of 9 kids. I come from a big family. My father was a professor for 40 years, but as you said in that introductory comment, I never thought I'd be here, and feel fortunate every day to have this opportunity. So after I graduated from college, I taught high school English for a while. I was a competitive athlete myself. Ran cross-country, indoor and outdoor track, all through high school, college, and then competed for several years in a variety of races, road races and track races. Then went to law school, and after graduating from law school, I actually practiced law for more than 15 years. I was a trial lawyer, spent more than 9 years as a federal prosecutor, most of that time in Brooklyn, New York, prosecuting organized crime cases, traditional organized crime cases. Last case I did when I was at the Justice Department was I was one of the principal trial lawyers in the second Oklahoma City bombing case, the case against Terry Nichols. Then I was in private practice in Cleveland, Ohio, where my family was, and was recruited out of private practice to be the dean of the law school at Cleveland State University. Thought I would do that for a few years, and then a new president came in while I'd been at the law school for about 4.5 years, and he asked me to serve as a provost, and then went on to be the president for 5 years at Northern Kentucky University in the Cincinnati metropolitan area, and then had the opportunity to come here to Ball State in 2017. So I'm now in my 7th year as the 17th president of Ball State. And as I said a moment ago, I feel fortunate every day to have the opportunity to be a member of this very special university community.
What a ride.
It's been a great ride.
You mentioned your athletic career. You had at one point in time qualified for the Olympic trials. Am I correct with that?
That's correct. I was a distance runner, and as a young kid, my goal, I saw Frank Shorter win the gold medal representing the United States in the Olympics, and I turned to my father as we watched that on TV and said, that's what I want to do. So at the age of about 12 or 13 years old, my goal was to represent the United States in the Olympics. And fast forward a few years later, I qualified for the 1984 Olympic trials in the marathon. My best time in the marathon was 2:16. But unfortunately, about 5 weeks before the marathon trials, before the Olympic trials in the marathon, I had a stress fracture, and so wasn't able to make it to the starting line. And so experienced both the joys and great rewards of being a college athlete and a competitive athlete, and sometimes the disappointments. And that's why I think college sports is so important, because it teaches student athletes what it's like to be in life. Life is filled with successes and great rewards, and challenges and sometimes disappointments. And so my college and competitive career were filled with a lot of good things, but also some disappointments too.
And that actually leads me into my next question. Running is one of the most mentally taxing sports that you can engage in. So you're you've found your way through a lot of mental challenges when it comes to being a college athlete. How have you seen that change for the modern day student athlete in terms of the mental challenges that they're facing on a daily basis as student athletes?
Well, so I think our student athletes face many more pressures in terms of expectations than we faced years ago when I was in college. There's some of the things are the same. The level of discipline and dedication and preparation and teamwork, all of that stuff. But we were not burdened with social media. We were not burdened with, certainly as track athletes, weren't burdened with expectations about generating revenue for the institution. So it was much more personal, representing the institution, trying to represent your family and your teammates well. But I think now when you see the level of pressure that exists on student athletes, whether it's fans that are harping on them in social media or in various venues, and it's important for us to never forget these are young people, right? They're 18, 19, 22 years old. And so we should moderate the way in which we have expectations for our student athletes. We want them to represent us well on the court or on the cross-country course, also in the classroom and also in the community. And we should respect them for that commitment and dedication.
Absolutely. And then I guess leading off of that, how can we as a community and as a university support our student athletes, specifically at Ball State here, knowing that they face those challenges?
Well, so one of the things, and I've said this to your fellow students on occasion, I'll say it to the community. Let's say your roommate was in a play or the choir or on our esports team. You'd show up to support your roommate or your classmate, irrespective of whether they were the star in the show or irrespective of whether they were going to win that esports competition. So I would encourage all your students, and I'm excited about seeing students out at the events, come out and support your classmates, not just simply when they're undefeated. Come out and support them irrespective of their record because they're representing you, they're representing all of us. And I would say that to the same thing to your listening audience all across East Central Indiana. Ball State is your top Division I college and university. So come out and see our football team. Come out and see baseball and softball and tennis. Even come out to a track meet and certainly our basketball games because they are representing East Central Indiana and the state of Indiana with pride and commitment, as I said, both in competition and in the classroom and in the community.
We'll talk more about attendance and all that later on the show when we're talking about the teams themselves. But I know you're constantly there courtside supporting all of them, setting a great example.
And I'm sometimes providing some constructive suggestions to the referees, but in a constructive way.
I have seen you do that, yeah.
Constructive way.
Talking about, you mentioned that you were previously the president of Northern Kentucky. Comparing that experience with the one you're currently experiencing here in Muncie, what different opportunities have you had here in Muncie as president, and what are you trying to do here to better this university that you either saw at Northern Kentucky or that you didn't see there and now are trying to bring to this university?
So there are probably three things that are distinctive. I was grateful for my experience at Northern Kentucky. It was gratifying and exciting. But when I arrived there as the president in 2012, we were just beginning the transition to Division I. So in the first 4 of the 5 years that I was there, we were not eligible to compete in Division I postseason competition. We were in that probationary or transition phase. Here, of course, we're a very established program. The second difference is, we play FBS football. We play college football at the highest level in the country. Northern Kentucky didn't have a football team, so that's a different dimension and gives me an opportunity to participate in the NCAA governance processes in ways that I wasn't able to before. And I think the third thing that is different is I was so proud of what of the results that we had last academic year because we were successful comprehensively across all sport programs and in the classroom. So let me just do a little riff on how proud I was. So last year, as you know, we won the Jacoby Trophy for the best all-around women's sports program. We finished second in the Reese Trophy for the best all-around men's program, and we won the Institutional Academic Excellence Award for the best all-around GPA. No university in the 75-year history of the MAC has produced those three results in a single year. And to me, that makes me so darn proud that they're fulfilling what we expect. We want them to excel on the court and in the classroom and conduct themselves with character and integrity. So the level of success we had last year was unparalleled in our history, and as I said, unmatched in the history of the MAC.
I know when we talked to Jeff Mitchell earlier last semester when he was on the show, he talked about like where Ball State athletics wants to go from here, and the various structural advancements that they're making, the steps that they're making in their staff to try to better their student athletes both on and off the court. What are you doing as a whole to help the university to improve, whether that be academically or athletically?
So I think a couple of things that we're doing are providing some facilities, enhanced facilities that are up to the level of the way our student athletes are competing. So we're working on generating the philanthropic support to build locker rooms for softball and baseball. Presently, they get dressed off-site, so we want to get locker rooms and also enhance those facilities. We also, frankly, have a strength and conditioning center that is outdated in terms of its equipment. So we're raising the resources to build a championships performance center for all of our student athletes. We got great facilities out at the football stadium for our football players, but we want to bring those facilities up to a higher level, to a championship level for the champions that we have on our campus. The third thing that we're doing, and the restructuring that Jeff did, is having Lindsey Blom focus on a comprehensive approach to the health and conditioning of our student athletes, everything from nutrition to weight training and the like, as well as counseling and sports psychology support in a comprehensive way. And Lindsey is leading that very coordinated and comprehensive approach, which we know will help our athletes prepare and excel in competition. Will also help them excel in the classroom, and will ensure that they continue to be healthy so that after they graduate, they'll be able to have successful careers and meaningful lives.
Well, we talk about what's going on in the future, and it's equally important to discuss what's going on right now, and that's exactly what we'll do after the break. We're going to talk Ball State men's and women's basketball, so stay tuned. We're here with President Geoffrey Mearns here on the Cards Court, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie.
To catch the best stories in Ball State sports every month, tune in to the award-winning show, SportsLink Stories, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Victory Honda of Muncie is proud to support the creative storytellers of Ball State SportsLink.
Welcome back to the Cards Court here on SL Digital Radio, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Once again, here with President Geoffrey Mearns. President Mearns, let's talk Ball State men's basketball. It's a team that's had their ups and downs. Most recently, they're on a downtrend, but it's a long season. They've had some depth issues that we'll talk about, but I know you're at most, if not every, home game supporting. What have you seen from these guys, and what's just your general take on how the season's gone so far?
Well, as you say, it's been an up and down season. Some of the games have been difficult. Some of them have been disappointing. But what has been encouraging to me is I think the long-term potential of this team. They're hustling. They're playing hard even against some very difficult opponents. I think they're demonstrating that they're not going to surrender. They're going to play 40 minutes, 94 feet for 40 minutes. And so that's encouraging as I think about the long term. They're a young team, so I think they're learning to play together a little bit. But, we maybe can talk about this landscape with the transfer portal and NIL. I believe, three of our best players who were on the court this time last year are now playing at other institutions. So it's a challenge to build a program, but I think Coach Lewis is figuring out how to navigate this new environment. Very different than it was 10, 20, or 30 years ago when he was playing college basketball.
And I do want to touch on the transfer portal for just a minute because you talked about those guys departing. They departed for Power 5 schools. Jalen Sellers went to Central Florida and Peyton Sparks over to Indiana. So how do you feel that the transfer portal has affected mid-major schools like Ball State, and how can we adjust to stay up to par with what some of those Power 5 schools are putting out in terms of the transfer portal?
Well, so I think the transfer portal and NIL is actually affecting every institution. Dabo Sweeney at Clemson was complaining about the transfer portal. Some people have suggested that Nick Saban retired from Alabama because he didn't want to deal with the dynamic nature of recruiting. So college coaches at all levels of Division I have to recruit out of high school. They have to constantly recruit the current players they have, and then they have to be prepared to move quickly in the transfer portal. So I think it's affecting all institutions. I think we know that some good players may transfer to other institutions that they think have a higher profile, but we also need to take advantage of the fact that some athletes at those higher profile or better resource institutions may want to come here because you could imagine a player who has spent 2 years. Let's think about a basketball player who's spent 2 years working out, preparing for the time when he's going to get his chance to be a starting guard, and then the coach goes to the transfer portal and recruits somebody on top of him. Those players may look for an opportunity to play because they don't want to sit for 4 years. They want to play, and certainly playing at Ball State in a mid-major in the MAC can be a great opportunity for them. So we're all going to adjust to a new environment, and I think we're still in that adjustment phase.
Well, and similarly to what you just mentioned, you look at the team this year compared to last year, a decent chunk of the production as far as scoring goes, as far as rebounding, comes from transfers. You have Jalen Anderson, you have Davion Bailey, who have come in from other schools. Davion came from a community college and made an instant impact at the D1 level. It's opportunities for guys that maybe aren't getting as much playing time as they'd like to come here, and just because we're losing guys like Sparks, like Coleman, like Sellers, doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to find quality replacements. When we look at the production that they've had, is that then more encouraging that we have those guys coming in and that are filling those gaps, and that the transfer portal's helping as well as it's hurting?
Right. I think that's exactly right. And the challenge is building the chemistry and teamwork that you have to do, which you used to be able to do over a period of years. Now you have to do it on a more regular basis. The other thing I would say is, comparing to pro sports, how often have we looked at a professional team where the payroll in their roster in football or basketball or baseball is far superior to anyone else, and then they don't win, and you see a team with a lesser payroll who, for whatever reason, good coaching, good hustle on the team, good teamwork commitment, those upstarts win the World Series or win the NBA title. And I think that's the approach we have to take. We can't wring our hands and say we wish the transfer portal or NIL didn't exist, because they're here to stay. You just have to learn to adapt and play in that new competitive environment.
Yeah, President Mearns, we could talk about the nuances of NIL for a long time, but I do want to talk about what the culture has been like for Ball State men's basketball since Michael Lewis was brought in as the head coach, specifically talking about his role as the self-proclaimed campus party planner. What was your reaction when you first saw that he proclaimed himself the campus party planner, and how have you seen that change the culture around Ball State basketball?
Well, I think what he was saying is he wanted to see a different level of energy and excitement on the court. And he also understood that we needed to see a little more energy and excitement and enthusiasm in the stands. We needed to bring our students out in the student section, in the nest, but we also needed people from all across the campus community and all across East Central Indiana to come and generate that excitement. I mean, it's mutual, right? When we're in the stands, we get pumped up when we see players diving for a loose ball, or hustling on defense, or making a breakaway dunk. And they feed off of the energy that they feel and hear and see in the stands. So I was delighted to see that he wanted to focus on particularly getting students into the arena to generate that excitement for their classmates.
I remember last year, I think initially that really, really helped. There were a couple of games, the Eastern Michigan game, the Kent State game in particular, where attendance was north of $5,000. I think the Eastern Michigan game was a little touch
and
over
I was
6.
sitting on the courtside seats right in front of the student section for that Eastern Michigan game, and saw a little exchange of pleasantries between our students and the players on the bench at Eastern Michigan. Yeah. Nothing. By the way, I was really proud of our students. There was no profanity. There was nothing inappropriate, but they were letting them know the Eastern Michigan players know that they were at the Ball State basketball arena.
Well, noise is powerful. Comparing that to this year, though, the numbers, I wouldn't say they're necessarily bad, but they're definitely down from last year. I think a lot of that could just simply be attributed to the team's performance, but they've had problems with injuries, and when you have guys like Zane Dowdy go down for the season, one of the big transfers that was coming in, Ethan Britton Watts, never played a minute, and he was out for the whole season. What can teams do to counteract that when you already have your roster set and then guys start going down?
Yeah, I think that's another manifestation of the dynamic nature of your roster with the transfer portal. Of course, every team is going to have injuries. Some of them are going to be temporary. Some of them are going to be maybe longer term. But it compounds the changing nature of the roster. And I think what Coach Lewis is trying to do, and what I hope these players are trying to do, is get us back to that time when year over year over year we had consistent success at a competitive level. Now, we're not going to win the MAC every year. We're not going to hang a banner every year, but we want to be competitive. And I think it's a little, here we are, we're sitting on the 22nd of January. Really where we want to be playing consistently well is the middle of February, early into early March, and bring some energy and enthusiasm and momentum into the MAC tournament.
And then quickly before we go to a break, on the topic of injuries, you yourself sustained an injury recently. If you don't mind, what happened?
Well, so I wasn't practicing a 360 dunk or a windmill dunk. Actually, I dislocated my left ankle and broke it in 3 places on Thanksgiving afternoon playing ping pong with my son. So if you have any doubt that I come from a competitive family, if you can break your ankle and dislocate it playing ping pong, that demonstrates how important winning a family ping pong match is in my house.
Well, and I think with all the impressive stuff you've done, that may be up there.
It's the worst. It's the worst injury that I've ever had. But fortunately, about 8 weeks ago, the great surgeons and staff out at Central Indiana Orthopedics reconstructed my ankle. So now I have a little extra hardware installed in there to give me extra stability and strength going forward.
Well, hopefully you don't sustain any further injuries, and hopefully neither do these two teams, especially this women's team, who we'll talk about after the break. They are on fire. 10-game win streak after the latest win against Toledo. We'll touch on that right after the break here on the Cards Court, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie.
Victory Honda of Muncie. We're not just another car dealership, and here's why. We stand behind every car we sell and are dedicated to helping our customers save time and money. All our pre-owned cars undergo a rigorous 182-point inspection and come with a 90-day warranty to ensure that you're getting a Victory quality vehicle. Plus, you'll get 2 years of complimentary oil changes and tire rotations. We're part of a top 15 dealership group and have an enormous selection of vehicles with access to inventory at over 45 locations. You always get more for your trade and the best possible rates with us. We have an excellent relationship with hundreds of lenders. Our exclusive Car Doc maintenance and membership program will help you save hundreds of dollars in the process of maintaining your vehicle. Lastly, our state-of-the-art body shop and certified technicians perform high-quality repairs and paintwork on most vehicle makes and models. Victory Honda of Muncie. We're not just another car dealership.
Welcome back to the Cards Court. Griffin Leonard and Sam Niger here with the president of Ball State University, Mr. Geoffrey Mearns. Before the break, we were talking about men's basketball. Now let's turn the page and talk about this women's team that hasn't lost since early December, and they haven't lost at home since Thanksgiving break. Probably one of the more exciting teams that we have on this campus, if not the most exciting. And President Mearns, it was there was an exclamation point on that yesterday with the win against Toledo. Huge crowd at Worthen Arena, and the girls got it done in front of a packed house.
Yeah, our women's basketball team is just simply outstanding. As you say, they've only lost 2 games all year to UConn, a perennial women's powerhouse, and Notre Dame, who's also, I think, top 15, top 10 in the country. I think we're 6-0 in the MAC. And, we played 2 tough MAC opponents over the last week or so, beating Bowling Green in Worthen Arena last weekend and this past weekend beating Toledo, and beat them handily. I mean, I think we beat Bowling Green by, 20 points, and yesterday 14 or 16. And we took our foot off the gas in the last 2 minutes yesterday just to conserve that win. So it's pretty darn exciting. And different players step up. Maddie Bischoff, scores 19 about 6 days ago. Allie Becky scores 36 at Central Michigan, almost as many points as the entire team. This team just looks special. The way they hustle, the way they play on defense, they seem to anticipate where they're going to be. And they play tough basketball on defense and pretty effective basketball on offense. They are fun to watch.
They certainly are. And you talk about those losses to Notre Dame and UConn, but this team also has some big wins against Power 5 opponents this year in Georgia and Pittsburgh. I wanted to ask you specifically this question, almost from an administration standpoint. How important is it to have a team with the rapport like our women's basketball team beat those perennial institutions like the University of Georgia and Pittsburgh?
Yeah, and Allie Becky hit a buzzer beater against Georgia 2 days after beating Pitt. They expect to win those games, right? I mean, as you say, these are Power 5 great programs. And they don't go in there just to say we're going to play this game. They go in to win. And I think that's what that level of confidence that they have the ability, that they have the preparation to compete at the highest level is the message that we want to send all across our sports program. We want our football team, irrespective of whether they're playing at home or when they're playing at Georgia, to expect to be competitive and to be competitive in those games. Men's volleyball, women's volleyball, gymnastics, just a couple days ago on that same weekend, set an all-time program record. I think 2 or 3 of our student athletes scored perfect 10s. So I think those student athletes know each other. They see each other in the training room. They see each other on campus. So when you have success like that in women's basketball, it inspires the other student athletes to compete and want to excel at that highest level. So it infuses the whole sports program when you see our women's basketball team play at that level.
We talked before the break about the campus party planner and getting attendance in there for the men's games. We've seen the women's attendance steadily rise as well, and it was capped off by both the Notre Dame game and then this one yesterday where the attendance was close to $3,000, I think, which is close to matching what the men's game has seen at times. What have you liked out of the movement to get more people at the women's games and to support the women's sports movement?
Well, we're seeing women's basketball become increasingly popular all across the country. Whether it's Caitlin Clark at Iowa, those Final Four games were packed. There are sellouts now in big arenas for women's basketball. So it's an exciting game. I mean, it is not just, what you used to see, 25 years ago. These women can shoot consistently from three-point range. I mean, heck, Caitlin Clark can shoot consistently from half court, although Maddie Bischoff hit about a 34-footer yesterday at the end of the first half, a buzzer beater then. And they play a very physical game inside, and the ball moves quickly, they move quickly. It's exciting, high-quality competition. So it's fun to be there, and I love sitting courtside because I can see how intense that competition is really up close. And so anybody who's listening, if you haven't seen it, come out and watch because it's a lot of fun.
And there's an intense matchup coming up down the road against James Madison in the MAC Sun Belt Challenge, in the MAC and Sun Belt Challenge. So how have you seen the Mid-American Conference as a whole kind of adapt to the changes in women's basketball and embrace the fact that it is becoming a nationally recognized sport?
Well, so I like the partnership that we've developed with the Sun Belt. I'm chair of the MAC Council of Presidents, and so work closely with John Steinbrecher, our commissioner, and brought that idea about both for men and women doing that. I think one of the things that we can do in similar conferences is do that in more sports because the Sun Belt conference in football and basketball, it's a high-quality conference, and we want to play high-quality opponents every day in every competition. So I like that challenge. I hope it's something we can expand with the Sun Belt and maybe with other conferences as well. And that Sunday is going to be pretty darn exciting. There's apparently a football game that's going to be played later that afternoon or evening, but everyone should come out to the women's basketball game to get prepared for that other contest that day.
Super Bowl. I never heard of it.
I think it's a football game that's interspersed around a concert.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And commercials.
Yeah, I heard Usher was going to be performing at that one, so might have to tune in for halftime. But looking forward at the rest of the season for this women's team, sky's the limit, right? Like where do you see this team going, and where do they still have to grow if they're going to really turn up the Jets by March and look at making a serious run at not just the MAC tournament but the NCAA tournament?
So the MAC women's basketball is a challenge, and so we're going to be playing 2 times a week against high-quality opponents, including James Madison. So I hope that in addition to building momentum and confidence, we're also making sure that those players get adequate rest. And that's one of the other advantages we have. We have a really deep bench. I mean, Coach Salih can put players 6 through 12 on the court, even against very good opponents, even in critical times of the game, which I think will then help our starting 5 be well rested and well prepared as we go into late February. And then, of course, we've had a couple of really good teams over the last few years, and they've just come up like maybe 1 shot short, 1 shot rim out. This year we just have to kind of go over the top and win the MAC tournament and ensure that we get a place in the NCAA tournament. But given the quality of team that we have, and I don't want to say this as a fallback, but we should get an at-large bid the way we're playing right now.
We were just chatting about that earlier. Yeah.
So I hope the NCAA selection committee, the women's basketball selection committee, is listening on to your broadcast so that they take note of us. I mean, we certainly should be. Last time I checked, our women's RPI was in the low 50s. We've got to be, if we continue to play this way, we're going to be ranked in the top 25 before the end of this season.
And specifically talking about Coach Salih, he has gotten so close, but no cigar, up to this point in his career at Ball State. I'm not sure how well you know him personally, but how have you seen this year for him? Has he had a different mentality this season than he has in the past, or is it just kind of the right pieces falling into place at the right time?
So what I've seen the evolution of Coach Salih over the time that I've been here, and this is, again, my 6th or 7th season, his level of confidence in his players, he'll certainly share some of his opinions with the referees during the game, but you'll see much more poise and composure with his athletes. He's got them prepared, he gives them direction, and he trusts them to then execute that game plan or a specific play. So he seems there's a level of confidence. The other thing I would say is, last year, one of the most impressive things I saw from him as a coach, again, we were playing Toledo in Worthen Arena. We were down big in the second and third quarter, slowly chipped away, and we had a shot at the buzzer to tie up the game and send it in overtime. And I think if we had won that game, I think it was our last MAC game of the season at home. Had we won that game, we would have been undefeated at home, and so those players were disappointed. And there was a lot of emotion, sad emotion, as they were leaving the court. And I saw Coach Salih walking over to do his radio or television interview, and he actually had a slight smile on his face. So after he was done with the interview, I spoke to him briefly. And what he said was, notwithstanding coming up 1 shot short, what he was so pleased with was to see the fight that they had. That even when they were down 12 or 14 points, may even been more than that they fought all the way back. And what that gave him confidence was this was a team that was going to fight through adversity as they went into the MAC tournament. And so that's just a level of coaching maturity to understand it's not always just about the outcome in one single game. It's the journey, it's the path that they're on that gives you confidence that you're going to be able to compete at the most critical times in a championship game.
How important is it to have a leader like that, like Coach Brady Salih, who's been around a long time? We talked about the transfer portal. So many players in and out. Brady's been here over a decade. He knows this program, he knows Muncie, and he knows basketball. And how important is it to you to have a leader at the helm of that program that knows it's bigger than 1 shot. It's the growth of these players, and it's the growth of these human beings that's going to carry them through the rest of their life.
So I would say 3 things. 1 is he has created a program. 2, he's created a program that is attracting high-quality players both out of high school and through the transfer portal. Nyla is a perfect example of that. That was a real catch for us. And so I think that is also significant. And the third thing I would say is his level of experience and, as you say, his knowledge of our university and our region and his knowledge of head coaching is helping to mentor other coaches. Certainly he can help with Coach Lewis. He can certainly help with Coach Cruz, folks that are new in this business. So he's a leader in the coaches' room that I think is really beneficial for our entire sport program.
Yeah. Well, thank you for touching on that. Great, always great talking about basketball. Before we let you go, just a quick little bonus segment here, talking about social media. In the ever-changing world of technology, what have you seen? I mean, I'm sure you're not necessarily scrolling through TikTok every day, but I know you got a Twitter account and everything. What have you seen from these teams and how they promote themselves and trying to promote attendance and various other things to get people out to the games?
Yeah, and certainly for our players and our coaches and our sport programs to be present across all social media platforms is really important. As you say, I've got a Twitter account, and I know I've been on TikTok, but I've never been on TikTok to see what's on there or some of those other, or Instagram and all that other stuff. I leave that to some of you young folks. But in all seriousness, it's very important for our players and our coaches and our sports programs to be out there to promote that excitement. We want to build a fan base for generations to come, and I think that's an important ingredient to do it.
Well, the Ball State women's basketball social media team does a great job of generating hype for their team, getting raw reactions of coaches, players, fans. They posted a video. You may or may not have seen it on Instagram yesterday after the game. I wanted to take a moment to show it to you. And
is this the one where Coach Selly is dancing in the locker room?
Yeah.
Okay, that's...
Well, just for those who haven't seen it.
That should be for mature audiences only to see Brady Selly dancing.
Yeah. Well, for those who haven't seen it, here's the clip.
All right, listen, guys.
Something's going on.
Listen, hey, all I'm going to tell you is that was a good game.
No.
All right, well, President Mearns, now that you've seen the video, the song "Ski Yee" by Sexy Red, is it?
It is. Yeah.
What were your thoughts? Does Brady Selly have a future in singing, or what were your thoughts on the video?
Well, first of all, I'm not familiar with that song. It's not on any of my playlists, I can assure you of that. Actually, Coach Selly was not too bad. He's a much better coach than he is a dancer and singer, so it's good that that's what we're paying him to do. But it's just a reflection of the excitement and energy that exists on that team, that they have that kind of relationship between the players and their coaching staff.
What are the chances that if this women's basketball team makes the NCAA tournament, we see you break out a couple of moves?
Well, I've already broken my ankle playing ping pong. I certainly don't want to re-injure it trying to dance, but I certainly hope to be there when they're climbing the ladder in the arena in Cleveland at the MAC championship to cut down the nets and maybe get a couple rounds into the NCAA tournament. That would be a lot of fun, and I might be tempted to dance, but you'll have to define dance, pretty liberally if I'm moving around.
Well, we may have to find you a different song to sing to, but this has been great. Thank you for coming on the show, and we're going to take a break, but when we get back, we'll hit you with PBP's keys and send you on your way for the week. But once again, thank you so much, President Mearns, for joining us.
You're welcome. It was a great time. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll be right back here on the Cards Court, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie on the SportsLink Digital Radio Network.
Every road has its challenges. We say, bring them on. At Honda, we engineer each vehicle to outthink obstacles, to overcome difficult conditions. We engineer them for drivers who are determined to power through, just like you are. Rise to the challenge with the rugged performance of the Honda Passport, Pilot, and CR-V.
Welcome back to the Cards Court here on the SL Digital Radio Network, presented by Victory Honda of Muncie. Griffin Leonard and Sam Niger with you once again. Thank you so much once again to President Mearns for joining us on the show. That was an absolute blast. I know you had fun, Sam. So, but yeah, let's get into PBP's Keys, our weekly little segment where it's 3 keys for these two teams to unlock if they want to have success in their upcoming schedule. Sam, let's start with the men's team. It's been a tough couple of weeks, but you can't get discouraged. You got to keep playing every game as if it's the MAC championship. You got to just keep going, and the wins will come if we keep this quality level of basketball.
And I mentioned it earlier, Griffin, that the upcoming schedule is a little bit easier than we've faced in the past on the men's side. You know, it's like you said, you've just got to tackle one game at a time. You can't look at the big picture because at the big picture right now, we're 10th in the standings. There's a lot that could have gone better up to this point in MAC play, but all it takes is 1 or 2, starting to get your momentum. With a young team, as you start to get momentum, you start to grow in confidence, and then it's just exponential growing on itself. This is a team that still has the capability of making the MAC tournament. The MAC tournament is relatively easy to get into as far as conference tournaments go. 8 teams in the MAC get to go to that tournament. Ball State should absolutely be keeping that in the back of their mind still. That's a good goal and an achievable goal for this team.
Yeah, I think when you look at the schedule, and we'll break that down here in a minute, but there's some winnable games.
Yeah.
You just need 2 or 3 in a row
Exactly.
to really stretch into some momentum, and then there's a reason why teams get hot at the end of the season and carry that over the tournament. You
Absolutely.
don't have to be good the whole schedule. You just have to be good when it matters, and the first step is to get to Cleveland. But for the women's team, and I'll preface this with that, I don't think it's going to be a problem. But after this big win against Toledo, you have to stay humble. You have to go into every game knowing that there are quality teams in the MAC, and just because we had this big result doesn't mean the rest are going to come as easy.
They aren't, but as that is especially true in that Ball State knows that they have a target on their back, and I think at this point, they've embraced it. There are some leaders on that team, some veteran players that are going to rally the troops and tell them that obviously this is the year where if Ball State's going to make a run in the MAC tournament, this is the squad that they want to do it with. They need to recognize that each game is just as important as the last, and they have the mental toughness to be able to do that. You look at Allie Becky and Maddie Bischoff, Nyla Hampton, like right there, that big 3 is solid. That's a big 3 that can take you into March, and they recognize the importance of these upcoming games. They recognize how good this team is, how much momentum they've got, and I don't think they're going to take their foot off the gas.
And then the third key, Sam, and this goes for both teams, I think you got to emphasize the post play here in these couple of games. You look at the men's game on Saturday, they lived and they died by the 3 ball. It was hot early in the second half, and they jumped out to that big lead. And then when it got into overtime, they were cold, and it came back to haunt them. The women's team, not necessarily a problem. But Alex Richard looked great in that game against Toledo. Her, Marie, Annie, if you can get them all going and get them involved a little lower down on the block, I think you'll have better success.
Yeah, I'll start on the women's side. They do have such depth down on the blocks. I mean, that's a pretty powerful big 3 down low, no pun intended, from Roush, Clefane, or not Clefane, from Roush.
You went back to last year.
I know,
for a second
right?
there,
Roush, Richard, and Kiefer. That's quite the unit right there, and all of them have different strengths. Richard has turned into a great scorer. I look for more minutes out of her in the upcoming weeks. Kiefer has such a great defensive presence, and then Roush is just your do-it-all kind of big. She's not a stretch big, but she can get it down low. Get it done down low. She's physical in the paint. She'll earn you a tough bucket or 2. As good as Ball State is from beyond the arc, as good as they are in the mid-range, I think focusing on that post play on the offensive side is what's going to take this team to the next level. And then on the men's side, I mean, we talked about all year how good Bashir Jihad has been. He's been the pleasant surprise. He's solidified himself as one of, if not the best players on this team. He's got to go back to what he's good at. I'm glad that he's added the 3 ball to his game, but he has the ability to take guys to the rack and really be the physical enforcer of this team. We just haven't seen that in recent matches. So maybe this week he'll be able to get that done, but certainly something that he's going to want to emphasize in his own personal game.
Yeah, we'll see if they can indeed do that, and let's turn to the schedule to see which matchups await the two sides for Ball State men's basketball. They kick off the week on Tuesday night at Buffalo. That's a game against a Buffalo team that has struggled this season, and it's a good momentum builder if you're the Cardinals, but you got to get the job done there. We turn to Wednesday in the women's basketball. team hosts Miami of Ohio in a rivalry game. That's youth night. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. here at Worthen Arena. Looking at the SL Digital schedule, looks like we got Isaiah Rosner and Asha Watkins on the call. So look forward to that dynamic duo calling it on SL Digital if you can't be there to see it in person. Then we turn to the weekend, and it's a Saturday doubleheader. The Ball State women's basketball team heads to Ypsilanti to take on the Eastern Michigan Eagles, and the men's basketball team takes on the Northern Illinois Huskies. That game will be a ESPN Plus SportsLink produced broadcast with you on play-by-play.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, myself and Donnie Harmon.
But if you don't have Plus or you don't like Sam for some reason, then you can head on over to SL Digital Radio and you can catch Lucas Thatcher and AJ Switek on the call.
There you go.
But that'll be all for this week and the episode of the Cards Court. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to tune in next week when we talk with a good friend of mine, former Ball State cheerleader and Ball State alum Tyrone Shelton. He is going to be a blast to have on the show. We cannot wait to have him on next week. But until then, for Geoffrey Mearns and Sam Niger, I'm Griffin Leonard. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good week, and chirp, chirp. The court is adjourned.
The Cards Court is hosted and produced by Griffin Leonard. Be sure to follow BSU SportsLink across social media for the best stories in Ball State sports. The Cards Court has been a production of Ball State SportsLink.